Hello, this is Dirk, and I'm going to produce a screencast about NetBeans. NetBeans is a Java IDE, an integrated development environment, which allows a very versatile selection of projects to be created, including a simple application that has a graphical user interface using Java RAD, as it's called, or rational application design. And with rational application design, the concept is that changes that were made to the graphical user interface can be changed graphically, and that when one changes that graphically, the changes get synchronized with the source code. Now, I am not going into the details of how rational application design works. However, I'm going to assume that the project has been created, and I'm going to assume that the options that were used to create the project wasn't Java with Ant, but Java with Maven. So I'm going to assume that a person intentionally chose to create his Java application with Maven, as is indicated here, and that the person has a completed project that runs properly. So I'm going to clean and build just to make sure that I don't get any build errors at the last moment. I'm going to run the application within the framework, and within the framework it runs just fine. I've programmed it so that when I click on the three buttons, the text of the label changes. And as you can see, the file menu works. It produces a few warnings down here, but the file menu essentially works, including the exit function. Now, because this is a Java Maven project, what that means is that the dependencies folder that NetBeans shows you is a virtual folder. It's not actually a folder in your project directory. It has jar files which were downloaded from the Maven repository. And what I would like to do is, in spite of everything, I would like to export this application to run standalone and not just to run within the NetBeans framework. So to do that, I'm going to go to the place where my NetBeans projects are located. This one is called Swing Test 4. And within the Swing Test 4 folder, within the folder with the project name, there's no dist folder, but there's a target folder. And within the target folder, there's a jar file. Now, just to prove to you that this is not a basic exercise, I'm going to try to run this jar file. So basically, the point of this particular demonstration is just that the jar file will not run as is. It gives me a predicted error message, no main manifest attribute, and then it names the jar file. So obviously that's not the way to do it, and I don't really think it's highly recommended by the developers of NetBeans that you use a Maven project and make it run standalone. But for practical reasons, that may be exactly what a person wants to do, just because he's in control of his own computer. My desktop is configured so that if I simply click on a jar file, it will open the jar file in my archive extraction program. It's called ARC under Plasma 5. So this is what's actually in the archive, including the photograph that is appearing as the icon of the label that you just saw. So I click on extract because we're going to actually edit the jar file. And I'm going to extract this to a folder I call temp. I work with a folder called temp. Quite often I extract. That happens quickly. As you can see, the only thing that the archive actually includes is the classes that I defined myself. So now that I've extracted this archive into the folder temp, the thing to do is to open that folder and to see that my archive utility automatically created a subdirectory. This is something that's practical from user-friendly point of view, but there are cases in programming where a Java archive or a zip file does not have a single directory at its top level. So what the archive manager for Plasma does is it creates one if there wasn't one. It's not ideal, but that's what it does. So it's not ideal for programming. So I go into this top level directory that the archive manager created for me, where things have been extracted to, and the very first thing I'm going to do is to edit the manifest file. So this is the manifest file. It's actually in a subdirectory, and I'm configured that if I simply click on this, it opens in Kate. And there's no specification for what the main class is that the project is supposed to run from. And I've created a little template in my desktop folder, which actually reminds me of this. It opens in the same program. And so Kate is now showing me what a main class declaration is supposed to look like in general. Kate is a tabbed program, so I can have multiple documents open. I hit Control-C, and in the manifest file, I hit Control-V, thereby copying what I just got from Kate. And the template happens to fit this project perfectly. Normally, I would have to adapt this template to include a different package name or a different main class, perhaps. Control-S saves, and I close Kate. So I've edited the manifest file, and now there's something else I have to do. I actually have to create a local copy of my virtual dependencies. So the way I do that, the most efficient way I can think of doing it for the purpose of creating a video, is to open another terminal window in the same directory that corresponds to the zip file or the jar file. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a simple little trick that they provided with NetBeans, which is that for each of these dependencies, I can right-click on the dependency and click Copy Location. I copy the location. I minimize the NetBeans window. I type in CP and then Shift-Control-V, thereby pasting what was on the clipboard, and then a space and a dot. And then sure enough, within a few seconds, the jar file has appeared in the same folder. Now I have to do this for each of the dependencies that formed part of my project. So I'm just quickly going to do that. That's my second dependency. My third dependency. My fourth dependency. My fifth dependency. This is my sixth dependency that I've just copied, making sure I'm not losing count. My seventh dependency is coming up. And I believe I have one left. This will be my eighth and last dependency to copy in this way. And so now I have a destination folder that has a rather awkward name that contains, in essence, what the jar file that I'm going to create is supposed to contain, except that there's one little catch. This folder contains a collection of 8 jar files. And putting a jar file into a jar file is not supported under NetBeans as far as I know. They may have a plugin that I'm not aware of, but by default I'm going to assume that NetBeans does not support it. So what I would next need to do is I would next need to go into each of these jar files from the GUI and to take the contents, not the meta information but the actual class information, and basically extract those contents. But there's a reason why I don't do that. The reason I don't do that is because my archiving utility will once again take the contents of each of these jar files that I've extracted something from and put them into a subdirectory that the archiving utility simply decides to put as an added layer, which, as I said before, is impractical for certain programming purposes. So what I would like to do is I would like to take the contents of each of these jar files and unpack them into the same directory that the jar file was in, not replacing files that were already there, and then to get rid of the jar file. Well, I wrote a little script that automatically does this in a batch fashion, that automatically unpacks all those jar files. So that is, I've just typed in the name of the script that I created. I've described what it does. Let's see if it does what it's supposed to do. Well, there aren't any jar files left in the folder, that's for sure. There is now a com subdirectory and an org subdirectory, and if I go into the com subdirectory, sure enough, there's a jgoodies package name and a looks. So it would seem that my script has done what it was designed to do, to unpack all of those archives and to create subdirectories, and replacing the archives in the present directory. So the only thing I have to do next is to rebundle everything into a jar file. And the thing is, a jar file, in case the listener didn't know, is really a zip file that has simply been given a JAR ending instead of a ZIP ending. So the way I now create my jar file, my new jar file, is I type in zip under Linux -r, meaning recursive, and then I type the name that I want my jar file to have. So the jar file is to reside in the super directory of the present directory, 2 dots, /, and I'm going to call this swing test 4.jar. When one enters commands from the command line, where the command assumes a file type, it's frequently the case that the file name extension doesn't always have to be correct. And in this case, I'm saving myself an extra step simply by naming my zip file jar to begin with, rather than calling it swingtest4.zip and then having to rename it afterwards. But I have to tell zip what I want it to zip. And so I put an asterisk, which will expand into the list of the contents of the current directory. So let's do this. So it produced verbose output telling me what everything that it added to the archive. And now I go cd / to the parent directory, and on my right I'm going to go to the parent directory to verify that swingtest4.jar has in fact been created. Swingtest6.jar belonged to a previous exercise. I'm interested in swingtest4.jar, and for the purpose of testing it, java-jar swingtest4.jar. Now let's cross our fingers and hope this runs. sure enough, my application runs from a standalone jar file. So I've done everything necessary to package it, and I'm sure when I click on the menu, it's simply going to print the same warning messages it did before. So these are not really important right now. Basically the warning messages are telling me that some other developer has to refine the code a little bit, because this present code will not work in some future version of Java. So the app does exactly what it did before, and I can close it from the menu, or I can just close it by clicking on the close button of the menu of the window. And so I've created a standalone jar file, even though I had the audacity to create my application as a Maven application within NetBeans. So that can be done with enough perseverance by a person who knows what he's doing. So that concludes my little video. Thank you for watching.